Welcome to Supernatural Saturdays here on the Bald Brad channel, where we take one day out of the week to step aside from the politics, the craziness of the world, and dive into the paranormal, the unexplained, and the supernatural. What we're going to be looking at today is a follow-up of last week's supernatural segment, where we looked at this video here, Congress UFO hearing. It's even crazier than you think, and we had two skeptics about this whole thing, Mick West and Stephen Greenstreet, talk about other possibilities of what all these UFOs, these UAP sightings could be. Specifically, UFO skeptic Mick West joined the post Stephen Greenstreet to break down the historical congressional UFO hearing. They discuss the witness testimonies, evidence presented, and reveal how one of the witnesses is connected to ghosts and werewolves of Skinwalker Ranch. Now, Stephen Greenstreet talked a lot about videos that he created that basically disproves some of this stuff, and that's this video right here, the UFO Lie Shocking Truth of Pentagon AAWSAP program. We heard about this, and we all came to agreement, we need to check this out and see what the man has to say, because we can't always listen to viewpoints that basically side with us, which is, in a nutshell, confirmation bias. So let's hear what the man has to say. Many of you know we're out there to explore all this stuff. We don't know what's truth and what isn't. Hence the exploration. Hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. Head over to baldbrad.com. Pick yourself up some merchandise. We got a lot of goodies over there for you. Without further ado, let's go ahead and roll it. If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. Henry Kissinger. One man, one legend.
You are here, in the middle of a domino effect. One that started years ago, and one that shows no sign of stopping. A bombshell story said UFOs are real. A whistleblower said the government knows. The military has encountered them every day. For years, there are videos and photos. Insiders say off-world vehicles. Congress says we need to know more about the UFO. A task force created to figure it out. Are they aliens? Is there doubt? A report's released saying maybe it's real. The information comes with an official seal. A UFO office without delusions will look to the skies and find conclusions. The government seems ready for the long haul, and on the dominoes fall.
I will tell you.
Orale! At first I was like, is this guy trying to rhyme here? Like, what's going on? Be a little poet? Throwing up gang signs? Like, what up, homie?
You unequivocally that there is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This all seems like it's heading towards an ultimate truth no longer ignored. A revelation, for better or worse, will further define the universe. But the story was too good to be true. The story was wrong. And instead of being closer to the truth, we probably couldn't be further away.
The basement office.
For those of you unfamiliar with the current UFO story and the cast of characters within, here's a quick primer based on information that was originally reported. In 2007, at the behest of Senator Harry Reid, the Pentagon, via the Defense Intelligence Agency, created a UFO program called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or ATIP. The first director of ATIP was a person whose name wasn't reported and who remained unknown. The next director of ATIP was Luis Elizondo, a counterintelligence official at the Pentagon who by now has become the face of the whole story. ATIP was funded with $22 million. The Pentagon awarded the $22 million to Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies, or BASS. BASS was contracted to perform ATIP's UFO research and investigation. BASS was founded by millionaire and longtime Harry Reid financial supporter Robert Bigelow. Bigelow's been hunting UFOs his whole life. Within the Bass team was Hal Puthoff, a former member of the Church of Scientology who claims to be a psychic who can predict the future. During the Cold War, Puthoff was involved in the CIA's Project Stargate, which attempted to create psychic spies that could use paranormal powers to fight the Russians. Stargate was shut down after not achieving this goal. The rest of the Bass team was largely unknown. AATIP investigated UFOs for 5 years, from 2007 to 2012. In 2012, the Pentagon pulled the program's funding and shut it down, saying it was determined that there were other, higher priority issues that merited funding. Despite losing funding, Luis Elizondo claimed he kept AATIP going for years after this, staying on as the program's director. On October 4th, 2017, Elizondo resigned from his job at the Pentagon.
If he stayed on for that long, then who was funding the whole thing? I mean, $22 million is a lot of money, but when you're looking at defense budget and kind of where all our money's going, it is not even an eye drop in a 5-gallon bucket, folks. So it was nothing. And like I said, time and time again, I think Marco Rubio is right to say, look, if these things are real and they're flying over our military installations, jamming our radar, jamming our jets, our aircraft, creating issues for training programs, then we need to come to the bottom line of like, what the hell is this? Is it us? Is it a foreign adversary, which we all don't think it is? Or the other side of it is we have crazy people in the highest levels of intelligence that are cuckoo, and we need to figure out if they're lying or not. Either way, it's a huge issue. $22 million to kind of figure out what the heck's going on is a drop in the bucket to me. Lou Elizondo seems like he found a lot of stuff, but we'll let him continue here.
Pentagon, frustrated that UFOs were not taken seriously by military leaders at the Department of Defense. Immediately after his resignation, Elizondo, Hal Puthoff, and others took the AATIP UFO story to former Blink-182 rock star Tom DeLonge.
This was not planned. This was not planned. Literally, I swear it wasn't planned. I actually saw Blink-182 in San Diego in concert recently. Yeah, okay, all right.
And his To the Stars Academy, or TTSA, a for-profit science and entertainment company. On October 11th, TTSA held a press event featuring Tom DeLonge, Lou Elizondo, Hal Puthoff, and other former government officials who claimed to have new revelations about UFOs. DeLonge introduced Elizondo to the world for the first time.
My name is Lou Elizondo. For nearly the last decade, I ran a sensitive aerospace threat identification program focusing on unidentified aerial technologies. It was in this position I learned that the phenomena is indeed real.
I'm curious on what you all think about this. Do you think this guy is part of the PSYOP program? Do you think he's out there to spread information to kind of leave you wondering or to point you in a direction which is the wrong place? He has clearly a lot of information that he's not willing to say because he's saying it's, classified and stuff like that. My question is that why was he not involved in the hearing? Why was he not involved in the UFO congressional hearing? Maybe he was behind closed doors. I don't know. But I'm just curious as to why he's not up there. Now, to give you a little bit of more background, take it as a grain of salt is what I'm about to say. There seems to be like kind of two big sides to this. There's the Jeremy Corbell, team side of things with George Knapp, with Dr. Greer as well. And then there's kind of Lou Elizondo and that whole side of it. And they both are going at each other, saying things about one another. And I'm just curious on what you think, because either they're both sides are lying or one side's lying and the other one's a PSYOP, or one side is lying in a PSYOP and all those other things. Let me know in the comment section. It does support the channel, folks. Hit that like and subscribe button if you're having a lot of fun with us. Let's continue.
In addition to revealing Elizondo and the Pentagon UFO program, DeLonge also announced that he was going to
build an exotic craft with an energy source that can revolutionize the world.
Build his own UFO. Another presentation by former DoD official Chris Mellon revealed a shocking new UFO case, and he displayed a large photo of the UFO.
At one point, the object soars to 80,000 feet. hovers, then drops at supersonic speeds, coming to a full stop. How did it accomplish these feats?
The UFO in the photo was later reported to just be a blurry party balloon. The mainstream media reaction
I actually heard about that. It's not the only time that's happened, but that's pretty funny.
to this event was couched as cheeky celebrity news, rather than science or national defense. But that was all about to change. On the same day he resigned, members of TTSA had introduced Elizondo to UFO author and longtime UFO researcher Leslie Kean. She interviewed him and published 2 stories in the Huffington Post in mid-October, which revealed in a media exclusive the existence of the Pentagon UFO program and Elizondo's role in it. However, these 2 stories were still mostly ignored by the mainstream media. Leslie Kean then reached out to longtime associate and journalist Ralph Blumenthal. Blumenthal pitched the ATIP and Elizondo story to the New York Times. And on December 16, 2017, the New York Times and Politico released front-page bombshell news stories that revealed the Pentagon's ATIP UFO program to the world. Included in the stories were videos of UFOs filmed by the U.S. Navy. Within hours, dozens of other news agencies had the story. Within days, hundreds. The first domino had finally fallen.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone, whatever that means.
Full speed ahead. Ain't gonna stop till we're all the way there. Full speed ahead.
But some people had doubts. They noticed that something was off, that some things were not adding up. One of those people was researcher John Greenwald, one of the nation's leading authorities on government secrets. He runs the Black Vault, a website that hosts millions of pages of government documents obtained via the Freedom of Information Act. When he read the December 2017 UFO stories, he immediately noticed some strange discrepancies.
Well, right off the bat, I noticed that the reporting from Brian Bender at Politico and Leslie Kean, Ralph Blumenthal, and Helene.
I think this guy's written some books. I'm going to have to look into that because I would find it fascinating what this guy has to say about a lot of this stuff, especially if he's like conglomerating or kind of building a warehouse of declassified documents, like such as his website. That'd be really cool.
Cooper at New York Times had a slightly different program name. Politico says Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program. New York Times reports Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Why was there that difference? The amount of sources that both news media outlets had were very, very small and likely the same. So how is it that the reporting was different? As the reporting went on, it got worse. I mean, there were like 7 or 8. I lined them all up with dates and who the media outlet was. And there were like 7 different variations of what ATIP even stood for. And to an investigator, a researcher like myself, and there's a lot of other people out there, if you're looking into something, you need to have the name right. Because if you don't have the name right, how are you going to find anything?
Right.
Because
when you submit a Freedom of Information Act request, you have to be specific with the government what you're asking for. So if you requested for the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, they could come back and say, hey, that doesn't exist.
Absolutely.
Because the name was wrong.
Yep.
And you could suddenly be on a goose chase looking for the truth, for the real documents, correct?
Absolutely. The accuracy there was incredibly important.
The Pentagon officially acknowledging its Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program.
Pentagon has confirmed the existence of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program.
The Advanced Aviation Aerospace
Aviation, the Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program.
question, why couldn't you just ask the source in terms of who wrote the piece from Politico, or what was it? The other one was like New York Post or something like that, or New York Times, whatever it was. Like, why couldn't you just say, hey, you know what? I wanted to follow up here. You have the advanced aviation program or whatever. This one has the advanced aerospace identification program. Like, why are these two words different? What were your sources to get these names? And I think you could have come down to the bottom line. Furthermore, I mean, is it really that big of a deal in my opinion? Not really, because, okay, you put in aviation and you got to switch to aerospace. I mean, if you're somebody that has a house full of 2 million plus documents, you've been down this road probably before of trying to get documents out there. So you got to put in a different name, and you already aggregated all the other possibilities that could have been. So you could just throw those in there as well and just try to get everything.
Program.
So the writing was on the wall that there was something odd just behind the meaning of the acronym.
Another reported detail that is inconsistent was the years all this supposedly occurred. The original New York Times report said the program began in 2007. But further down the same article, they report the funding and actual contract creation of the program wasn't until late 2008.
You start digging in on that and realize that the bid solicitation was never posted for companies to bid on getting the contract, wasn't posted until 2008. Yet we were led to believe that ATIP started in 2007.
Created in 2007.
2007.
So how can you solicit bids a year after the program allegedly started when the reporting said $22 million went to a contractor that started a year before the bid went in? Wait, none of that makes sense.
It could actually make sense, and hopefully I'm not trying to create a lot of reach here, but it's a terrible and really rough analogy, but hear me out here. Is you wrote a script, a movie script. You have certain characters in mind. You have certain people in mind that you would like to play certain roles. You would have certain directors that you would like to do or to direct it. You have certain executive producers like to be a part of it. Producers, like whole crews, right? Maybe some actual like warehouses and production houses that want to be involved with it as well. But you don't actually have the funding yet. You went out and created an entire script, and you have all the puzzle pieces there to create something. And, you just don't have the actual funding yet. So you go out there with that business plan or that proposal in mind and say, look, we got all the pieces, we just need the funding. So theoretically, you could have started it in 2007 or whenever, and then you got your funding and bids later on after that with all that information that you compiled. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility, and hopefully I'm not talking crazy here, but to me, it would make sense that it could start in 2007. You had the idea. You hear people talk about this all the time of, oh, I wrote a movie script when I was 15, like Superbad, for example, with Seth Rogen. Yeah, I had it sitting in the drawer for a while, so, I've been working on this for decades, even though you weren't really working on it for decades, but you'll say that anyways. That's kind of similar with what I believe is happening here.
Adding to the confusion, Politico's reporting released on the same day as the Times, with reportedly the same sources as the Times, says ATIP began in 2009. What? Now, in journalism, dates and names are so basic. You want to get the basic names right. You want to get the basic dates right. You can't be a year or two off. And to this day, the reported dates of the UFO program remain all over the place.
Generally, in reporting like that, if one thing is wrong, you have to ask the question, what else is wrong?
Further questions and issues arose with Lou Elizondo's role with ATIP. In hundreds of media reports, Elizondo is credited as the director of ATIP. Media outlets also phrased it as he ran the program, or he was in charge of the program. And Elizondo, without doubt, is the face of this whole story now. But the Pentagon has released statements stating Mr. Elizondo had no responsibilities with ATIP. And this is a statement the Pentagon has doubled down on, and they're not budging.
Yeah, but look when those statements came out. I mean, you're talking almost a decade later. And if what's his face said, oh God, he worked in S4, why I'm blank on his name. Big UFO guy. We did a whole thing on him. I am totally blanking right now. Bob Lazar. Look, Bob Lazar 100% worked in certain areas. And I think it was Alamos or whatever it was. They said the guy never worked there. I mean, he has credentials. I think he has like a W-2 form from them for getting paid. I mean, he has certain things that shows that he works there. He actually took George Knapp into the facility and walked them around. By the way, there were people in there that knew him and knew him of when he worked there. but the place says he never worked there. So just because the Pentagon says one thing, look, if you're going to sit there and poke holes at the New York Times and Politico for getting dates wrong, which, let's be honest, folks, the Hunter Biden laptop, the Trump witch hunt with Russiagate, there's a lot of things where the journalism's gone astray, okay? So I'm not going to put all my eggs in one basket with them. But with here, you know, decades later, Pentagon doesn't like the fact that he came out whistleblowing all this stuff, giving them all this information, regardless of whether he exposed classified or declassified information, doesn't matter. Just a little sus is all.
And even now, over 4 years later, this central part of the whole story continues to be disputed. Another confusing detail is, at the very top of the original Times report is a video of a UFO filmed by the US Navy. The Times reports that AATIP investigated and released this now famous video to the public. Yet the video was shot in 2015. AATIP shut down in 2012. Also, the Department of Defense released a statement saying no, that video had not been cleared for public release.
But didn't Lou Elizondo say that he stayed on from like 2012 to 2017 or something like that? Isn't that what was stated? I'm not trying to just meaningfully poke holes here, but I mean, I'm just trying to connect the dots of what this guy's trying to say. I'm in the same boat as him. I'm a skeptic. That's why we do Supernatural Saturdays. Yes, to get away from the politics and the craziness of everything. That is true. But I've always been curious about this since I was a little kid with the experiences that I had with the supernatural and the paranormal and all those things. So I'm on the same road as this guy. It's just I'm poking holes in the sense of Lou Elizondo said he was there from 2012 after for a little while. Falls in the same realm of when this video was supposedly captured or whenever.
And some in the media wondered how much of this was simply a so-called sweetheart deal between Senator Reid and his longtime friend and financial supporter, Robert Bigelow.
Good question.
Back in 2017, there were a handful of journalists who pointed this out as a potential red flag.
Public records show Bigelow contributed about $20,000 to Reid and his Political Action Committee.
That campaign contributor got research contracts from this program. That just is a bad picture.
There are other outstanding questions, confusing statements, and blatant errors.
Just want to go back really quick, and I want to look at those statements. So, if you look at this Bigelow company, right, 2003 was $5,000, and then a year later, $5,000. A year before, right, 03. So it looked like he was doing about 7, 8, 9. Okay. Well, if they said what is it, $20,000 in total? I mean, at a span of what? It looked like a decade. To me, in my opinion, it's just not that much money to. I mean, is that what it takes? $10,000 in a decade to get $22 million of business? Does that sound right to you guys? I don't know. I feel like I had to give way more money than that. Heck, folks, get out your pocketbook and start supporting Trump or somebody else in politics, I guess. $1,000 a year is going to do it for a decade.
To Reid and his Political Action Committee.
I mean, you say I just want to make sure I get this right.
Of journalists who
there we go. Bigelow, whose company received some of the research contracts, was also a regular contributor to Reid's re-election campaigns. Campaign finance records show at least $10,000 from. I mean, that. Am I crazy, you guys? It doesn't seem like that much money to sit there and sway somebody like Harry Reid to give you a $22 million contract. $10,000. You're telling me that there's nobody else that contributed to Harry Reid's campaign that was more than that? I mean, that means he ain't much to buy off. Let me tell you, folks.
Pointed this out as a potential red flag.
Public records show Bigelow contributed about $20,000 to Reid and his Political Action Committee.
That campaign contributor got research contracts from this program. That just is a bad picture.
There are other outstanding questions, confusing statements, and blatant errors. But despite all this, the story, mostly as originally reported over 4 years ago, mostly without any corrections or updates or disclaimers, continues to spread like wildfire and has become legendary.
So what you're telling me is that UFOs are real?
Bill, I think we're beyond that already. I put my entire career on the line because I believe in what I believe in.
He ran the Pentagon's top secret UFO program.
I knew this was breaking news for the front page of the New York Times.
And then, bam, the New York Times story, it changed everything.
It was a bombshell, right? That's what it was.
This is too big to turn away from.
This is real. Wake up.
TMC investigates.
I don't know if I'm going to have a job tomorrow just for having this conversation with you.
UFOs, the Pentagon Proof, Tuesday at 8.
Then, in October of 2021, the plot twist. Remember that unknown and unnamed individual who was the first director of the AATIP UFO program? Well, we eventually learned his name, James Lakatsky. And after that, we learned his story. He's finally come out of the shadows to set the record straight.
I didn't know there was two guys running the show. This is news to me. I've never heard this guy's name. I'm really intrigued now.
Lakatsky, along with Colm Kelleher, a project manager for the Pentagon program, and journalist George Knapp, released a book titled Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, an insider's account of the secret government UFO program.
I think that's a fairly new book.
They say the story we've been told for over 4 years is wrong. Lakatsky's book says, since the December 2017 article in the New York Times, there has been a multi-year frenzy of speculation, misinformation, and confusion about the nature of the program. One of the purposes of this book is to correct the record. Co-author Colm Kelleher did an interview saying,
the New York Times article in December 2017 mistakenly used that acronym AATIP, and they mistakenly assigned Lou Elizondo to be head of this program. And that was a mistake in reporting by the New York Times.
They say many details in the original story were in error. And guess what? There's actually real documented evidence to back that up. And surprisingly, some of these documents have been out in the public domain for years now. It's just that many people, including myself, didn't fully understand what they were or how they related, if at all, to a Pentagon UFO program called AATIP. Probably because they don't mention anything about AATIP and they don't mention UFOs. They mention something else. So I now present to you the mostly untold and underreported story of the Pentagon's AAWSAP program. In 2008, at the behest of Senator Harry Reid, the Pentagon, through the Defense Intelligence Agency, created a program not called AATIP, but rather the Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program, or AAWSAP. We know this because here's the actual official Pentagon document outlining AAWSAP, not AATIP.
All right, let's look at the document just really quick here. So the Acquisition Support Division of the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, has the responsibility to provide guidance and oversight of the Department of Defense acquisition process. Produce and maintains a projection environment in which the U.S. air, naval, ground, and space. Okay, here we go. In order to accurately assess the foreign threat to U.S. weapon systems, a complete as possible understanding of potential breakthrough technology applications employed in future aerospace weapon systems must be obtained. Objective is one aspect of the future threat environment involves advanced aerospace weapon systems application. The objective of this program is to understand the physics and engineering of these applications as they apply to the foreign threat out to the far term, wow, through 2050. So looking at new technologies, basically. Interesting. Okay.
Pentagon document outlining AAWSAP, not AATIP. The director of AAWSAP was a Defense Intelligence Agency scientist named James Lakatsky. We know this because here is his name listed on official Pentagon documents as being in charge of the program. In many ways, AAWSAP started with James Lakatsky. According to both Lakatsky and Senator Reid, Lakatsky had approached the senator to say he believed the UFO phenomena was real, and he wanted a program to investigate not just UFOs, but also how UFOs might fit into the realm of what we might consider the paranormal. Reed told Lakatsky he would support the creation of a program, but, according to Reed, they faced a challenge: how to convince Congress to allocate taxpayer money to investigate UFOs. Could they create a UFO program without actually mentioning UFOs? Reed told New York Magazine, "I said to Lakatsky, well, if you were me, what would you say to people in power in the United States Senate who have huge control over the spending of defense money?" And here's what Lakatsky said: "What I will do is prepare something for you that anyone can look at that wants to, and it's strictly science." He put it in scientific language, what the study should consist of. Here are the actual AAWSAP contract objectives. There are no mentions of UFOs at all. To anyone reading it, it might seem like just a normal aerospace technology contract. The actual objective of the program was essentially, using currently evolving technology trends, predict what kind of aerospace technologies foreign adversaries will have 40 years from now. That's basically it. AAWSAP appeared to be something normal, that the government would normally spend money on. AAWSAP was funded with $22 million. The Pentagon awarded the $22 million to Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies, or BASS. BASS was contracted to perform all of AAWSAP's technical research and analysis. We know this because here is an actual Pentagon document acknowledging BASS as the contract recipient. BASS was founded by millionaire and longtime Harry Reid financial supporter Robert Bigelow. Within the BASS team was Hal Puthoff, who we already briefly discussed, as well as other scientists with a history of unorthodox ideas, including Dr. Colm Kelleher and Dr. Eric Davis, an astrophysicist who's written papers discussing psychic teleportation, time travel through Stargate wormholes, and bending spoons with your mind. BASS hired a team of 50 people, and then the work on AAWSAP began. On the surface, AAWSAP appeared to be an aerospace technology program. To Harry Reid, in his words, AAWSAP was actually a program to study UFOs and related phenomena. With BASS, however, that so-called related phenomena would take AAWSAP in a shocking and very unexpected direction. A lot of AAWSAP's investigations took place at Skinwalker Ranch, a supposed paranormal hotspot in Utah owned by Robert Bigelow. As outlined in great detail, on the record, by Lakatsky and BASS leadership, the so-called Pentagon UFO program was not just a UFO program, but rather an investigation into a cornucopia of spooky and scary things, including werewolves, ghosts, and half-dinosaur, half-beaver monsters. Literally. The project manager of the program referred to Skinwalker Ranch as a paranormal Disneyland.
So the idea was to have a living laboratory on Skinwalker Ranch that we could assess what was going on. Unusual creatures, discarnate voices, poltergeist activity. So it was a paranormal Disneyland that really started the whole thing off.
AAWSAP spent only 1 year investigating UFOs, ghosts, and goblins before the Pentagon started to pull the plug. In 2009, after reviewing AAWSAP's reports, the Pentagon states that it was determined the reports were of limited value. In the December 2017 Politico article, a congressional staffer is quoted as saying, "There was really nothing there that we could justify using taxpayer money," and that even Harry Reid agreed it was not worth continuing. The Pentagon decided not to renew AAWSAP's funding and shut it down completely by 2012, stating that the program was terminated in 2012 due to lack of real progress and concerns about the viability of the program. and that it was determined that there were other higher priority issues that merited funding. James Lakatsky.
I could see that idea now with the reporting of it. If you sent that to somebody like, oh, I'm looking for werewolves and all those other things and ghosts, like I get it. I totally understand that of somebody looking at this going, this 22 million probably could be spent in other places. If I think you were looking at strictly UFOs and maybe continuing in the connection to what the original program was stated, even though it was kind of a falsehood of the guy basically saying, look, I'll create something in which the Pentagon will give us money for and we can look at whatever the hell we want. But it seemed like the original intention was to look into UFOs and connect that to the propulsion and the weaponry that could be utilized in aerospace, hence kind of UFOs, UAPs and stuff. But it seems like Bigelow went a little bit too far with it by looking at freaking some insane things. And I like Skinwalker Ranch. I like the show. I find it very fun because that's what exploration's all about. Seems like that book was really interesting, of which this gentleman here is picking a lot of his information from. But I don't know where he's going with this just quite yet.
Says he spent the next few years trying to get new funding to resurrect the dead program and to keep the paranormal investigations going, but he was unsuccessful. Finally, Lakatsky says he retired in 2016.
And that is the mostly untold story about how $22 million in taxpayer money was spent on a wacky paranormal funhouse. And it appears that at the time, the Pentagon had no idea this silly spooky stuff was even happening. How is that possible? Well, Lakatsky, the Pentagon director of the program, says that for security reasons, he was hiding AAWSAP's activities from officials at the Pentagon.
People in my own office, they didn't know what we were doing. They had no idea that I was running Skinwalker Ranch. They had no idea whatsoever.
And was Harry Reid aware of the ghosts and goblins? Well, I guess it depends on which version of his story you want to believe. In 2018, in an interview with New York Magazine, Reid denied ever being briefed or updated on any of AAWSAP's activities. Ever? Ever. But then in 2021, Reid told George Knapp that not only was he aware of AAWSAP's activities at Skinwalker Ranch, but that he was potentially planning to go to the ranch himself.
I remember getting a call from you while you're in the well of the Senate, and you asked about Skinwalker Ranch, whether your staffers should go there and whether they'd be safe. Did you consider sending some of your people to the ranch, and did you ever consider going there yourself?
I considered it, but based on information I got from you and others, I decided not to go.
It would also have drawn attention to the ranch and the program, right? If you went there, you'd have to tell somebody about it.
That's for sure.
And Senator Reid would eventually fully endorse this whole crazy story 2 months before his death by writing the foreword to Lakatsky's book. In it, he calls out the New York Times.
The December 2017 New York Times story has done a tremendous amount of good, but unfortunately, it has also muddied the waters. It left the government's AAWSAP program completely out of the narrative.
Yeah, why wasn't any of this stuff reported in that bombshell 2017 New York Times article? How did a story about a program called AAWSAP, which investigated UFOs, werewolves, ghosts, goblins, become a story about a program called ATIP, which only investigated UFOs?
I'm curious on how he's going to address that, but it doesn't surprise me that Harry Reid would have a wish-washy story and potentially could be telling the truth that he know nothing about the intricacies of the program itself, because in a nutshell, you guys, if I'm following along correctly, he basically BS'd the Pentagon and the Department of Defense to give him funding for this program, that they weren't really looking into weaponry of aerospace or aerospace weaponry and advanced technologies in the way of probably what they presented to the government. I would imagine is highly illegal, and decided to look into paranormal activities on Skinwalker Ranch for about a year. And that doesn't mean that maybe they didn't look into other things, I don't know, that were away from Skinwalker Ranch. But it makes sense why Harry Reid would say, like, I don't know anything about this. Look, you can know that Skinwalker Ranch was around. You can know maybe some big details about the thing without actually knowing the intricacies, but he's probably protecting himself if somebody were to ask a question, like, I know nothing about it. You know, and he's right to say, like, maybe I shouldn't have gone, or this gentleman was right to say, like, hey, if you would have gone, it probably would have raised eyebrows if you were there, which was echoed by George Knapp on the audio there that we just saw. So I think that part's a nothing burger in my mind. A lot of this, I mean, maybe the Skinwalker Ranch is the most outlandish thing, but I'm still not seeing his huge, like, whoa, this is a shocking truth of Pentagon AAWSAP program. I'm not, like, shocked right now. Some of the stuff, most of the stuff I actually knew already.
Well, Leslie Kean is a longtime UFO believer and UFO researcher, writing UFO stories going back decades. She wrote a best-selling book on UFOs in 2010, and it was Leslie Kean who approached Ralph Blumenthal to pitch the big UFO story to the New York Times. She was one of the authors of the New York Times article.
In a recent Showtime documentary, Leslie Kean was asked why stories about alleged encounters with alien creatures were not included in her 2017 New York Times article. And she replied that her specific goal with that article was to give UFOs credibility, so she avoided reporting on some things.
I chose not to focus on it because the angle that I was taking in my reporting was to try to get credibility for the subject, and I knew that that was not the way to go. That was not the first step in terms of getting people to accept this.
So an author of the original New York Times article, the article that was the first domino to fall in all of this, says she wrote the article with a specific angle in mind. Get people to accept UFOs as real. That sounds like the goal of an activist, not a journalist. But I see where she's coming from, because could you imagine if that first New York Times article had talked about werewolves and poltergeists and giant dino beavers? It would have been laughed at and ridiculed and used as a prime example of the government wasting taxpayer money. But because all of that wasn't mentioned, and only unidentified flying objects were, that New York Times article continues to validate UFOs with not just your average citizen, but also with members of Congress.
Since the New York Times story came out in December 2017, it's politically viable for elected officials to come forward and say, I support this kind of research. But that's for researching things in the sky that might be a threat to national security or to aviation safety. It's another matter for a politician to say, I agree with spending money to investigate places like Skinwalker Ranch with spooky stories of boogeymen and werewolves. No politician is going to fund poltergeist research or looking into werewolves. They'd be crucified.
So how much of the...
Well, to be honest, we've done a lot of weird things as a government. They made movies about it, like the Goat Men, that were like doing some sort of psychological thing on goats and all those other things. We've done some crazy stuff. Okay, so we put funding in some weird psychological things. There's like vision type stuff where you have somebody in a secluded area supposedly being able to look at military installations in the Russia from their home and things like that. Like, don't give me this stuff like, oh, well, we wouldn't be going and funding weird and abnormal things from poltergeist and paranormal activity. We've done it. We've already done it. So don't give me that. Come on. My question is this trying to basically associate the whole idea of, well, she left out the werewolves, the poltergeist, the paranormal stuff, the ghosty-wosty activity of Skinwalker Ranch so that she could build legitimacy around UFOs, because UFOs itself has an actual legitimacy where we have documented proof of UFOs, where we don't really have that much documented proof of ghosts and werewolves and Bigfoot and all these other things. Again, the whole show is about all the supernatural things that I just listed, but I think she was right to kind of pinpoint the UFO idea because that was what the footage was predicated on, of which they were bringing about. So is he upset the fact that she didn't raise awareness to all the weird stuff that they're doing at Skinwalker Ranch? I don't know if that's necessary, but if you want complete exposure, sure, she should have put it in there. But to say, like, oh, she's an activist, I mean, come on, man, it's journalism. Everybody's an activist nowadays. Come on.
The actual story did the original New York Times article report? How much of the actual story is currently influencing Congress?
The scope of the AAWSAP program was gigantic compared to the small sliver of information that was reported via the New York Times. And so the purpose of the book was really to set the record straight. I think the book really encapsulates about 97% of AAWSAP, whereas the 3% was what the New York Times article had described.
3%. According to those actually in charge of the actual program, the original New York Times article about the program only contains 3% of the actual story. 97% wasn't included. So let's talk about the 3% that was. It was originally reported that the name of the program was ATIP, and it was led by a guy named Lou Elizondo. So first, where the heck did the name ATIP come from? In his book, program director James Lakatsky writes, ATIP was a made-up substitute name to describe AAWSAP.
Okay.
A made-up name? So he's saying that ATIP
didn't even exist, that ATIP itself was a nickname, and only a nickname, to the AAWSAP program. So they were the exact same thing. ATIP was just a nickname, AAWSAP being the program.
The program was nicknamed Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP. People have had trouble trying to get documents out of the Pentagon by saying they want all documents in ATIP, and they have a hard time because that wasn't actually the name of the program. The top name there is the actual name of the program, but ATIP was the nickname that it went by.
And even Harry Reid and the Pentagon have previously agreed with this. Reid stated in an interview that ATIP and AAWSAP should be considered together. When researcher Roger Glassell asked about the names ATIP and AAWSAP, a Pentagon spokeswoman replied that they were the same program, and that AAWSAP was just an alternative name for ATIP.
To me, it's not a big deal. In the same way, you guys, they changed the acronym from UFO to UAP. They're talking about the same thing. I mean, we do this all the time where we create nicknames for other programs. I don't know. As of right now, this is a big nothing burger for me.
So how did ATIP become a nickname for AAWSAP? Well, remember how Lakatsky said he was hiding AAWSAP from other officials at the Pentagon? How, according to Lakatsky, they had no idea whatsoever about AAWSAP's activities? In their book, the authors say Senator Reid and those working at Skinwalker Ranch were worried that AAWSAP's activities would eventually come to light.
Yeah, that's what I just said before, because you devised a whole program that was to look at something specific, but you were kind of doing something wrong by looking at something totally else. Yeah, you were looking at paranormal and supernatural stuff, including UFOs on Skinwalker Ranch. It wasn't like that was out of the realm of questioning in terms of what they were researching. But again, like, yeah, you would try to hide some form of it. Again, the original idea was, how can we get funding to look in the UFO? There's no way in hell the government's just going to give us money for it. And you're like, sure, let's create a program where they will give you money for it. Like, yes.
As such, Senator Reid submitted a request that AAWSAP be given top secret special access status, which, if approved, would have officially limited how many people had access and control over the program. Here is the special access request letter submitted by Senator Harry Reid to Deputy Secretary of Defense William Lynn in 2009. But instead of saying AAWSAP, the actual program name, Reid used the nickname ATIP. But Reid's plan to protect AAWSAP apparently backfired. His request was denied, and his letter was widely distributed within the Pentagon. The cat was out of the bag.
Suddenly, the rest of the Pentagon, which had no idea that this program was underway, they had no idea. Suddenly, everyone knows about it, and they start asking questions. Gosh, what if this gets out that we're involved in study of UFOs and ghosts and creatures?
So two things appear to have happened here. One, Reid's letter was the first time many within the Pentagon had even heard about this program, and Reid's letter used the nickname ATIP. So according to those who were previously in the dark about all this, ATIP was the name of the program. 2, the Pentagon didn't want this embarrassing story spreading outside the Pentagon. They didn't want it in the press, and they didn't want speeches in Congress about government waste. So they moved to shut it all down. The New Yorker quotes a Pentagon official saying,
People worried that if all this came out, that the government was spending money on this will be a bad story. The Pentagon pulled AAWSAP's funding in 2010, and by 2012, the funding had completely dried up and AAWSAP was officially dead. But despite the program being shut down, Lou Elizondo, who had become interested in the UFO aspects of AAWSAP, claims he kept the effort going at the Pentagon. According to James Lakatsky, Elizondo adopted and appropriated the name ATIP to describe this new, small, unfunded, and unofficial effort. Lakatsky has only done a handful of interviews since going public. Here's a revelatory clip from one of them on the Coast to Coast radio show where he...
Wasn't this gentleman's whole premise the fact that, in a nutshell, Lou Elizondo was lying about going forward with ATIP since AAWSAP, or in other words, ATIP, was dissolved around 2012? So how possibly could he continue this whole effort in 2015 to 2017, of which, remember, 2015 was when the gimbal video, of which they showed in here, was released? So in a nutshell, in my idea, he's trying to make Lou Elizondo to be a liar, because he's like, well, the program didn't exist, so how possibly could this all be connected to ATIP? Well, you just heard another gentleman just say that was previously the manager of AAWSAP going, well, yeah, he continued this whole thing. It was unfunded. It was kind of an unofficial DoD program, but he did continue to do it. So doesn't it build kind of credibility into Lou Elizondo's story and narrative, the fact that he went on after it was dissolved in a nutshell to continue the whole operation? I don't know.
Specifically addresses this.
The ATIP name was created for a letter that Senator Reid sent in trying to establish a DoD SAP for our program for various reasons. And Lou used that name when he, and I guess it had to be in the time frame of 2012, and he used the name ATIP. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's fine. But there was a difference between the two programs. Ours had $22 million in funding. His had zero. But he did his thing, we did ours. But I can say that we were the only game in town.
So what did Lou Elizondo actually do? You know, the guy who everyone refers to as the director of ATIP, the Pentagon UFO program?
Luis Elizondo, former director of the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program.
Luis Elizondo ran the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program.
The man who ran that secret program, Luis Elizondo, thank you for joining us.
Was he even involved in the official Pentagon program at all? In the 221-page book about the Pentagon UFO program, Elizondo appears one time. That's a bit strange, right? One time, at a 2009 dinner, sitting at a table with members of AAWSAP and BASS, where the authors claim he was telling war stories about his psychic powers. That's it. Well, Elizondo himself has stated multiple times on the record that he had nothing to do with AAWSAP, including this emphatic tweet, which says, "It's been brought to my attention that despite my constant assertion in the media about my non-involvement in AAWSAP, some are under the false impression that I was part of it. For the record, again and again, I was not part of AAWSAP." Elizondo instead says he was in charge of the Pentagon's ATIP program, which I think we've established probably didn't even exist. Insiders say it was not an official program. It was a completely separate small initiative. A small unofficial effort. Not a program as the P in ATIP suggests, but more in his spare time, when his normal day job allowed, he looked for UFOs. There are two pieces of documentation that further supports this. One is an email from the year 2020, released via the Freedom of Information Act to John Greenwald. In it, Elizondo is challenging the Pentagon press office regarding their statements denying his role with ATIP. Elizondo concedes that his ATIP could be defined more as simply an activity versus an actual program. The second is an annual Pentagon evaluation of Elizondo from the year 2016. It outlines all his officially assigned responsibilities at the Pentagon, none of which have to do with UFOs or anything called ATIP.
I would have to look at that more closely just because they don't mention UFOs in this. Doesn't necessarily mean he wasn't looking at UFOs. I think this guy's making a good point of kind of throwing Lou Elizondo's whole program into shambles, kind of making it seem like it's a piece of crap initiative, because if AAWSAP is ATIP, and they're saying, look, they're basically synonyms of one another, they can be used interchangeably. AAWSAP was given $22 million of funding. ATIP wasn't. Lou Elizondo kind of wanted to do his own thing. We wanted to look into werewolves and paranormal and ghosty-wosies and maybe every now and then UFOs, where Lou Elizondo wanted to strictly look at UFOs, which is honestly kind of the main function of the program and what it was supposed to be in a nutshell. So maybe Lou Elizondo was like, you know what, hey, I'll still do this whole program thing, but I kind of will look at maybe what the origination of this was. And I'm just going to go look at the UFO side of it kind of on my own and still in some way, shape, or form be connected. I'm not trying to be on Lou Elizondo's side. I don't know whose side I'm on, man. I like Dr. Greer. I like George Knapp. I like Jeremy Corbell. I like Lou Elizondo. I like them all. They could all be lying for all I know. I'm just trying to build of like what I'm basically playing devil's advocate here. So this guy, gentleman's playing devil's advocate. I'm on the other side of devil's advocate as well.
So with all that in mind, let's look again at the Pentagon's official statement regarding Elizondo. That appears to be a true statement.
It does.
In April 2022, Brian...
I mean, it is technically true, right? It doesn't mean the guy wasn't running ATIP. Doesn't mean he wasn't the director of ATIP. He kind of created his own side thing and so own side gig himself. So in theory, yeah, technically they're not lying.
Brian Bender, the author of the original 2017 Politico article, tweeted that he now feels like he was purposely misled by numerous sources on what ATIP really was and wasn't. In response to a Twitter user stating, "Seems clear that they wanted to gloss over the paranormal stuff, which is like where all the money really went." Bender replied, 100%. They buried the origin story because they were afraid it would be perceived as an utter waste of taxpayer money. It would have also further soured the whole effort, given the Bigelow connection to Harry Reid. It was a pork project to investigate voodoo that morphed into UFOs.
Yes and no. I think, yeah, I could see it being a pork project, kind of just throwing money in there to investigate the voodoo. But remember, from my understanding, AAWSAP was to originally look into UFOs, and that's why they created the language, which we saw was about aerospace weaponry and propulsion and new technologies in the realm of kind of aviation. And that's why, if you're looking down the list, it was talking about propulsion and all those other things. So I think I think that last sentence kind of switches it. It was more of UFOs morphed into this whole voodoo stuff is kind of my understanding of it. So I think he has it flip-flop.
And regarding myself and all the Basement Office episodes I've made about ATIP and Elizondo, I was apparently wrong. It wasn't intentional, but in an honest attempt to report the truth about the Pentagon UFO program, I too feel like I was purposely misled. As for Elizondo, he, along with other former members of Tom DeLonge's To the Stars Academy, have been lobbying Congress to spend more money on UFOs. They say the original New York Times article continues to influence congressional leaders, since many of the paranormal aspects weren't included in that story.
Again, I mean, the UFO story was about UFOs. It wasn't about werewolves. It wasn't about these paranormal, I don't know what you would call them. Anyways, the paranormal research has been done at Skinwalker Ranch. The story wasn't even about Skinwalker Ranch. It was about these unidentified flying objects that our United States Air Force has captured. And so that was what it was talking about. And it was attributed to AAWSAP. And AAWSAP, a portion of it was looking at UFOs. And so was ATIP and Lou Elizondo kind of doing his own side thing, which was no funding, kind of just created an activity himself and was running that side of it. So again, I'm kind of missing the huge, like the UFO lie. I don't know where the lie is at in the realm of UFOs. If you want to say they were lying about the AAWSAP program to be able to look into the paranormal stuff, yeah, I mean, you are correct. but I don't know where I just don't see the New York Times lie. I don't see it.
Chris
Maybe I'm
Mellon,
missing it.
the guy who once stood in front of a gigantic photo of a blurry party balloon, admits that telling Congress about AAWSAP would be counterproductive. Their efforts appear to have paid off. Bipartisan congressional leaders like Senators Kristen Gillibrand and Marco Rubio helped create a new UFO program at the Pentagon. The new program is called the Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group. And another domino falls. I'm gonna leave you with one more thing. Lou Elizondo said he had nothing to do with AAWSAP. Nothing to do with the werewolves and ghosts and goblins. Nothing to do with AAWSAP. However, in May 2021, Elizondo filed a complaint with the Department of Defense Inspector General's office. Written in his own words, signed with his signature, Elizondo's complaint accuses some at the Pentagon of smearing his reputation by releasing statements denying his involvement as director of AATIP. In his complaint, which I obtained a copy of, he outlines, in detail, each and every role he claims to have had from 2008 to 2017. In 2008, he says he joined James Lakatsky on AAWSAP. His role was, in his words, AAWSAP's Chief of Counterintelligence and Security. From 2008 to 2010, Elizondo describes his various duties with AAWSAP, including reviewing incoming reports from BASS. In April 2010, he writes, Dr. Lakatsky approached me and asked if I would consider assuming the role of AAWSAP and AATIP director. And in May 2010, he says his new role was director for AATIP and AAWSAP.
I must be missing something here.
I think we should stop and ask ourselves, how did we get here? What stories brought us here? Who told those stories?
Okay. I mean, there's definitely some theatrics to this. I am highly curious on what you guys think, as well as the commentary that I provided here, because, I mean, I don't have any skin in the game. I wasn't a part of either of those programs. I'm just a third-party dude that's sitting in his closet trying to explore this world of supernatural, and that's why we do these every Saturday. Look, there's a bunch of lies going back and forth from, you know, Harry Reid to Lou Elizondo to that other guy that was a director. I think there could be a plausible story for both sides to end up being true, or maybe it's more of a gray area and a nuanced situation. I'm not going to believe everything the media says. Look, I'm a conservative, registered Republican, folks. We do a show Monday through Friday. I'm not going to believe necessarily what everybody tells me, especially our own government that continues to lie to us from the top down. But look, it was a program that got funding. They lied about it. They were looking under the hood on other things. Do I think they should have done that? No, but they weren't going to get the money in the first place. The government's looked into more crazier-ish than what they were looking into, let me tell you. I think we do need to look into UFOs. Look, if it ends up being a nothing burger, then we know that it's a nothing burger and we got nothing to worry about. But there's a lot of stories about our military personnel coming and encountering these objects every single week, every single day. I would like to know if it's China. I would like to know if it's Russia, because if it is, they shouldn't be in our airspace. China flew a balloon and other objects over our airspace many of times, and we didn't do anything about it. We waited till it got over the Atlantic Ocean, and then we shot it out of the sky. China has had a spy base in Cuba for, I don't know, like close to a decade is what they say. So our military doesn't seem to be on top of their ish right now. Maybe this is a wake-up call of what the hell is going on, and that's what we're exploring. What the hell is going on around us with the paranormal, the ghosty wokies, the spooky ooky? We're looking into the paranormal, the unexplained, and the supernatural. Always curious, folks, on what you think about all of this. I love hanging out with you each and every day. The Supernatural Saturdays, honestly, are starting to get kind of almost more fun than doing the news. And I'm almost tempted to start a spin-off channel just looking 100% into the paranormal, the unexplained, and doing a deep dive into this stuff. I don't know yet. Toss it up. We got a lot going on already, but Anywho, hit that like and subscribe button. Support the show by becoming a member here, even if you're not a fellow conservative or Republican. Heck, you're an American nonetheless. Become a member today. Go to baldbrad.com. Get yourself some merchandise, folks. We got a lot of goodies over there. We got hoodies. We got t-shirts. We got hats. We got mugs. We got mugs, which you saw me drinking out of. Would love for you to support us in any way you feel fit. Hit that like and subscribe button. Leave us a comment down below. Folks, I'll see you tomorrow here on The Bald Brad Show.